Tonight, allow yourself to slow down and drift into rest as we travel back to a quieter America, one that existed before glowing cities and restless nights. In this story, we'll gently explore how night once fell softly across early American towns and countryside, and how sleep followed the calm rhythm of the land itself. Find a comfortable position, let your breathing soften, and release the weight of the day. There's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. This is a peaceful place to rest. If you're listening from anywhere in the United States, from small towns to busy cities, you're part of this shared landscape, shaped by the same long evenings and gentle nights we'll explore together. If these quiet historical sleep stories help you relax, consider subscribing so you can return each night to a calm moment like this. You're also welcome to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from. It's always comforting to know how far this quiet reaches. Now, let the day fade, and allow the story to carry you naturally into deep, restful sleep. When night fell softly over early America, it did so without announcement. There were no glowing screens to dim, no clocks chiming insistently from every room. Darkness arrived gradually, like a slow breath drawn across the land. The sky deepened from pale blue to indigo, and then to a gentle black scattered with quiet stars. People noticed the change not because they were told to, but because their bodies felt it. As the sun slipped below the horizon, the day loosened its hold. Fields grew still. Tools were set down where they would wait patiently for morning. Doors closed with familiar sounds wood against wood, hinges that knew their own voices. Inside small homes, lamps were lit carefully, one by one, each flame a small island of warmth in the growing dark. Night was not something to resist. It was expected, welcomed, understood. In these early years, sleep followed the natural shape of the world. When light faded, activity softened. There was no sense of rushing to fill the evening. Time felt wide, unhurried, and forgiving. People moved more slowly, spoke more quietly. The body recognized that its work was done for now. Candles flickered gently, their light never harsh. Shadows danced along walls, stretching and shrinking as flames wavered. The air smelled faintly of smoke and wax, mixed with the familiar sense of wood, earth, and fabric. Outside, insects began their steady chorus, a sound so constant it faded into the background. Like the breathing of the land itself, families gathered close, not for entertainment, but for comfort. Someone might read aloud from a worn book, the words moving at an even pace. Others listened without strain, eyes growing heavy, thoughts drifting. Sometimes there was quiet conversation, sometimes none at all. Silence was not uncomfortable. It was simply part of the evening. Children learned early that night was a time for rest. There were no bright distractions pulling their attention outward. Sleep arrived naturally, like a tide returning to shore. Heads nodded, blankets were pulled closer. A parent's voice softened further, eventually trailing off as listening turned into dreaming. Bedrooms were simple spaces. Beds were sturdy, made to last, not to impress. Quilts carried the weight of careful stitching and familiar warmth. Windows let in cool air, along with distant sounds, the wind moving through trees, the faint creak of a settling house. These sounds were not interruptions. They were reassurances, proof that everything was as it should be. In many homes, sleep came into gentle phases. People rested early, woke briefly in the quiet middle hours, then returned to sleep until morning. This pause was calm and unremarkable, a moment to stoke the fire, whisper a thought, or simply lie still and listen to the night. There was no anxiety in waking, no urgency to be anywhere else. Darkness itself felt different then. It was not something to push back against. Without streetlights or glowing windows, the night wrapped itself fully round towns and countryside alike. Stars appeared brighter. The moon moved slowly, casting pale light across fields and paths. Shadows were deep, but never threatening, just part of the landscape. The body understood these rhythms. Muscles relaxed without effort. Breathing slowed. Sleep was not something to chase. It arrived because the world invited it. Outside, the land rested too. Animals settled into their own patterns. Birds tucked their heads beneath wings. Livestock shifted softly in barns, the sound of hay and hooves muted and rhythmic. Rivers continued their steady movement, reflecting moonlight in broken silver lines. Nothing hurried, Nothing demanded attention. In this early America, night belonged to everyone equally. Rich or poor, farmer or craftsperson, all moved beneath the same sky and rested in the same darkness. Sleep did not vary much from one household to the next. It was shaped by nature, not schedules. There was comfort in that sameness, a shared understanding that when night came, it was time to let go. The worries of the day did not follow people into bed as closely. Tomorrow would come when it came. For now, rest was enough. As the hours passed, houses grew quieter. Candles were pinched out one by one, leaving faint trails of smoke curling upward. The last footsteps faded. Beds creaked softly as bodies settled into familiar positions. The night deepened, holding everything gently in place. And in that deep quiet, sleep unfolded fully. Dreams rose slowly, often simple and calm images of fields, paths, familiar faces. Nothing sharp, nothing loud, just the mind moving gently, as it did when it felt safe. This was how night fell in early America, not suddenly, not forcefully, but softly. A gradual easing from doing into being, from light into dark, from wakefulness into rest. And as you listen now, you can imagine that same softness surrounding you. The world slowing, the day loosening its grip. Nothing left to finish, nothing left to decide. Night has arrived, and it is enough to rest. Before machines learned to hum, before factory whistles shaped the day. Work in early America moved at the same unhurried pace as the sun. Morning began not with alarms, but with light gradually filling the sky. People woke as the world around them did, slowly, naturally, without urgency. The body understood when it was time to rise, because the land itself was awake. Work followed daylight, not the clock. In rural areas, fields waited patiently. Crops did not demand attention before dawn, and tools rested quietly until hands reached for them. Farmers stepped outside to feel the air, noticing the direction of the wind, the dampness of the soil, the promise of the day ahead. These small observations guided the work more than any schedule ever could. In towns and villages, craftsmen opened their shops when the light was good enough to see clearly. Woodworkers, blacksmiths, and cobblers relied on natural brightness to guide careful hands. When shadows grew long or eyes tired, work naturally slowed. Precision mattered, and rushing was unnecessary. This rhythm created a steady balance between effort and rest. Muscles worked fully during the day and softened naturally by evening. There was no need to push beyond what the body offered. Fatigue was honest and expected, a signal rather than a problem. Meals arrived at predictable moments, shaped by the work itself. Midday brought a pause, not a break enforced by bells, but a shared understanding that bodies needed fuel and rest. People gathered, ate simply, and allowed themselves a moment of stillness before returning to their tasks. Children learned these rhythms early. They watched adults move through the day with purpose, but without haste. They understood that work had its place, and rest had its own. There was no sense that one should replace the other. In workshops, the sounds of labor were steady and familiar. The scrape of a plane across wood, the measured ring of a hammer, the soft movement of hands sorting materials. These sounds did not overwhelm the senses. They blended into the background, becoming part of the day's texture. Work ended when the light began to fade, not because a rule demanded it, but because the world itself signaled completion. Tools were set down carefully. Hands were washed. Workspaces were left in order, ready for tomorrow. Evenings were not used to recover from exhaustion, but to transition gently into rest. Bodies that had worked with the day felt naturally ready to slow. There was no need to force relaxation. It arrived on its own. This way of working created a different relationship with sleep. Rest was not a reward for overwork, nor an escape from stress. It was simply the next natural phase of the day. Sleep belonged as much to the rhythm of life as waking did. Seasonal changes shaped these patterns further. In summer, longer days allowed for extended work, balanced by warm evenings and deep, satisfying sleep. In winter, shorter daylight meant less activity, longer nights, and extended rest. The body adjusted without resistance, even in busier towns. The absence of machines kept life grounded in human pace. No constant noise filled the air. No mechanical urgency pressed against the edges of the day. When work was done, it stayed done. There was comfort in this predictability. People trusted that what needed to be accomplished would be in time. Tomorrow would bring another sunrise, another opportunity to continue. There was no need to carry the day's labor into the night. As darkness settled, muscles released their effort. The body remembered the day through gentle fatigue, not strain. Sleep arrived easily, shaped by honest work and quiet evenings. Dreams often echoed the day's simplicity: fields, tools, familiar paths. The mind rested as fully as the body because it had not been overstimulated. There was space for thought to wander without tension. This gentle rhythm did not make life effortless, but it made it balanced. Work had meaning because it fit naturally within the day. Rest had depth because it was not delayed or disrupted. As you listen now, you can imagine moving through such a day, rising with the light, working steadily without hurry, pausing when needed, ending when the world itself grows dim. There's no clock to watch, no pressure to keep going, only the steady, reassuring pattern of effort followed by rest. And in that balance, sleep waits patiently, ready to welcome you when the day is complete. Let your body remember that rhythm now, the gentle rise and fall of effort and ease, the quiet satisfaction of a day well met. There is nothing more to do. Night will take care of the rest. As the day's work came to a close in early America, evenings arrived without ceremony. There was no sharp dividing line between labor and rest, only a gradual softening. The sun lowered itself behind trees and rooftops, and with that slow movement, the pace of life eased naturally. Evenings were not something to fill or conquer. They were something to settle into. Inside homes, hearts became the quiet center of attention. A fire already burned low, not roaring, but steady and warm. Someone added a log, listening to the soft crackle as it found its place. The glow spread gently across the room, touching wooden floors and familiar furniture. Shadows stretched and shifted, creating a calm sense of enclosure. Light came from simple sources: firelight, candles, oil lamps. None were bright enough to demand focus. Instead, they encouraged stillness. Eyes adjusted, movements slowed. The body recognized that this was a different part of the day. Evenings followed habits shaped over time. These routines were not rigid, but comforting. A meal shared quietly, dishes cleaned with unhurried care, tools returned to their places. Each action signaled another step away from the active hours and closer to rest. Conversation, when it happened, was gentle. Voices stayed low, as if respecting the gathering darkness. Stories were familiar, often repeated, not because there was nothing new to say, but because familiarity itself was soothing. Laughter came softly, never sharp or sudden. In many homes, someone read aloud by firelight. The pages of a book caught the glow unevenly, words moving slowly from mouth to ear. Listeners did not strain to follow every detail. It was enough to let the sound of the voice fill the room, steady and calm. Hands often stayed busy, but not with work that demanded effort. Mending clothes, sharpening a tool for tomorrow, braiding hair. These tasks required little thought, allowing the mind to drift while the body remained gently occupied. Children grew drowsy without being told. The steady warmth of the room, the quiet repetition of sounds, and the low light worked together to invite sleep. Heads leaned against shoulders. Blankets were pulled closer. Bedtime did not feel imposed. It felt natural. Outside, the world continued to quiet. The last birds settled. The air cooled. Occasional sounds: a distant step. The soft lowing of animals floated in and faded. These were not distractions, but reminders of a living world settling down alongside the household. The hearth was more than a source of heat. It was a signal. As long as the fire burned gently, the evening continued. When it was banked for the night, sleep followed soon after. There was no reason to stay awake once these rituals were complete. Bedrooms waited patiently. They did not need to be prepared with special effort. Beds were already made. Night clothes were simple and familiar. Windows were opened or closed according to the season, letting in fresh air or keeping warmth close. Sleep arrived without struggle. Bodies that had followed the rhythm of the day were ready. The mind, soothed by routine, had little reason to linger. Thoughts slowed. Breathing deepened. Dreams rose quietly. These evenings created a sense of continuity. Each night resembled the one before, and the one that would follow. This repetition was not dull. It was grounding. It told the body that it was safe to rest. There was no fear of missing out, no urgency to stay awake longer. The night would be there again tomorrow. Rest was never scarce. As you imagine these evenings now, you may notice how different they feel from modern nights, and yet something in them may feel familiar. The desire for warmth, for quiet, for routines that gently lead toward sleep. Your body still understands these signals. Soft light, repeated habits, a gradual slowing. Even now, they can guide you toward rest. As the hearth dims and the room grows darker, the day releases its hold completely. Nothing remains unfinished. Nothing demands attention. Evening has done its work. Night is ready. Allow yourself to follow that same gentle path. The fire low, the room quiet, the world at rest. Sleep is not something to reach for. It is already here, waiting, as it always has. Asterisk. As the years passed and small towns began to grow, a quiet shift took place across early America. It did not arrive suddenly, and it did not announce itself loudly. Instead, it appeared gradually, much like the slow extension of daylight at the edge of spring. These were the first factories, modest buildings set near rivers and roads, blending into the landscape more than standing apart from it. At first, their presence felt almost gentle. Water turned wheels. Belts moved steadily. Inside, work followed a new pattern, but not yet a hurried one. The day stretched slightly longer, guided by opportunity rather than force. People noticed that they could continue a task beyond what sunlight alone would allow. Lamps were lit earlier in the evening, not to disrupt rest, but to complete work already begun. This change did not erase the old rhythms immediately. Many still rose with the sun and welcomed night as before. But slowly, the idea of time itself began to shift. Hours became something that could be counted more precisely, measured not just by light and shadow, but by productivity and progress. Factories gathered people together under one roof. The shared space brought a different energy, not chaotic, but structured. Movements were coordinated, tasks repeated with consistency. The sound inside was steady and predictable, a background hum that marked the passage of time. Outside, life continued much as it always had. Fields still waited. Homes still glowed softly at night. But inside these early industrial spaces, the day found a way to linger. Evenings lengthened by degrees. Work ended a little later. Meals shifted slightly. Sleep adjusted without protest at first, following the new shape of the day. The body, adaptable by nature, responded to the slow change. Light became something that could be carried indoors. Oil lamps and early gas lighting allowed workspaces to remain active even as dusk settled outside. This light was softer than what would come later, steady, warm, and limited. It extended the day without overwhelming it. For many, this change brought a sense of novelty. The idea that the day could be shaped, stretched, and guided by human design felt quietly remarkable. There was pride in the ability to continue, to refine, to build. Yet even as days grew longer, nights still held their importance. Factories closed, doors were locked, machines rested, silence returned. Sleep still waited, patient and necessary. The lengthening day did not yet crowd out rest. Instead, it nudged it slightly later, asking for flexibility rather than sacrifice. People adjusted their habits, gently retiring a bit later, rising with a little less light. This gradual shift allowed the body to adapt without strain. Fatigue remained honest, not overwhelming. Sleep still came, though perhaps after a longer pause. Communities adapted together. Boarding houses adjusted meal times. Evening routines shifted subtly. Hearths burned a little longer. Candles stayed lit just a bit later. There was still time for quiet, still time for reflection. The night had not lost its calm. As factories became more familiar, they settled into the landscape like another kind of workshop. Not yet dominating, not yet demanding. Just another place where work happened. And so, the day grew longer, not suddenly. Not sharply but softly, like the last light lingering at the horizon. Sleep responded in kind, arriving when it was ready, shaped by the same patience that had always guided it. As you listen now, imagine that gentle extension. The day easing forward, the evening stretching without tension. The night still waiting, steady and welcoming. Even change, when it comes slowly, can remain calm. And sleep, even in a lengthening day, still finds its way home. Asterisk. For much of early American life, time had been something felt rather than counted. It lived in the warmth of morning light, the length of shadows, the cooling of the air at dusk. But gradually, quietly, another presence began to enter daily life: the clock. At first, it was simply a tool, modest and unobtrusive, meant to help organize shared effort. Over time, it became a gentle guide, shaping the way bodies moved through the day. Early clocks were not everywhere. They appeared first in public spaces: churches, town halls, workshops where a single time could still many minds at once. Their ticking was soft, steady, almost soothing. A reminder rather than a command. People learned to listen. Bells rang to mark beginnings and endings, not urgently, but clearly. A bell in the morning signaled readiness. An evening bell suggested closure. These sounds blended into the fabric of town life, familiar and dependable. Inside factories and larger workshops, clocks began to coordinate movement. Work started together. Pauses happened at shared moments. The day took on a shape that could be predicted. For some, this brought comfort. There was reassurance in knowing when something would begin and when it would end. The body responded gradually. Wakefulness aligned with these signals. Sleep shifted to match. The change was subtle at first, going to bed a little earlier or later depending on the bell. Rising not only with light, but with expectation. This new structure did not erase natural rhythms entirely. Sunlight still mattered. Seasons still guided energy. But clocks added a second layer, a framework within which daily life unfolded. At home, clocks found their place on mantels and walls. Their faces were calm and deliberate. The movement of their hands was slow enough to follow, encouraging patience rather than haste. People glanced at them without urgency, using them as reference points rather than rulers. Evenings adjusted once more. Knowing the hour allowed people to pace themselves. There was time for supper, time for quiet tasks, time for rest. Sleep became something that could be anticipated, planned for gently. This planning brought a sense of order. Nights became predictable. Bodies learned when to slow, not because darkness demanded it, but because the rhythm of the day suggested it was time. For some, waking in the night changed too. The brief pauses between sleep phases became moments marked by quiet ticking, a steady sound in the background. Rather than unsettling, it offered reassurance, a reminder that time continued its calm passage. Children grew up with this new presence, learning to associate certain hours with certain feelings. Morning meant movement, evening meant calm, night meant rest. These patterns settled into the body without effort. The clock did not yet rush anyone. It did not push beyond comfort. It simply provided a shared language, a way to move together through the day. Sleep remained essential. Even as time became more precise, rest was still honored. Without it, the next day could not unfold properly. As you imagine this transition now, you may notice how your own body responds to time cues, how certain hours invite wakefulness while others naturally bring calm. The clock's quiet guidance can still be gentle. It can still support rest rather than disrupt it. As the evening arrives, the day releases its hold. The ticking continues, steady and even, matching the rhythm of your breathing. There is no need to watch the time now. The body already knows what to do. Night has come, and with it, the familiar invitation to rest. Allow yourself to follow that signal, just as generations before did, guided gently, peacefully, into sleep. As towns grew and work drew people away from family homes, boarding houses became a quiet and familiar part of American life. They stood along streets near factories, rail lines, and workshops, modest buildings that offered shelter, routine, and a sense of belonging. Though many strangers passed through their doors, the nights inside these houses shared a common stillness. Boarding houses were places of transition. People arrived with small trunks, simple belongings, and the expectation of work. Days were spent elsewhere, but evenings returned everyone to the same rooms, the same halls, the same gentle rhythms of rest. As daylight faded, the house itself seemed to exhale. Footsteps slowed on staircases worn smooth by time. Doors closed softly, one after another. Voices lowered without being asked to. The building settled into its familiar nighttime posture. Common rooms dimmed first. Lamps were turned down. Chairs were straightened. A caretaker moved quietly, checking fires, locking doors, ensuring that everything was in order. These small rituals brought reassurance. The night was prepared. Meals were shared simply, often at long tables. Conversation lingered briefly, then faded. People carried their weariness lightly, not as a burden, but as a signal that rest was near. Upstairs, narrow hallways led to private rooms. Each space was small, but sufficient. A bed, a washstand, a chair. Nothing excess, nothing distracting. These rooms were meant for rest, not display. As people settled in, the sounds of the house changed. The sharp noises of the day gave way to softer ones, the rustle of fabric, the quiet creak of floorboards, the distant closing of a window. These sounds layered gently, never interrupting the calm. Sleep in boarding houses was shared in an unusual way. Though each person rested alone, everyone slept together in time. Breathing rhythms aligned. The house held dozens of quiet lives, all pausing at once. Late at night, the stillness deepened. The building's structure responded to cooling air with slow, familiar sounds. Pipes ticked softly. Wood shifted. These were not disturbances, but signals of safety. The house was alive and well. Some woke briefly in the middle of the night, as people always had. In boarding houses, this was never alarming. A person might sit quietly on the edge of the bed, listening to the layered silence. The distant presence of others made the darkness feel less empty. Knowing that others rested nearby brought comfort. Even without conversation, there was companionship in shared quiet. No one was alone with the night. Windows admitted faint city sounds, the far-off call of a watchman. The soft movement of air through streets now nearly empty. These sounds passed through without lingering. Sleep returned easily. The body recognized the environment as safe and predictable. There was no need for vigilance. Morning would come, as it always did, in the early hours, before dawn. The house remained suspended in rest. No one rushed. No one stirred unnecessarily. Time itself seemed to pause. When morning eventually arrived, it did so gradually. Light filtered through curtains. Someone moved softly down the stairs. The house awakened without surprise. But during the night, all was still. As you imagine this shared quiet now, you may feel its calm settling around you. The sense of being held within a larger space. The reassurance of steady walls and familiar sounds. Even today, that feeling remains comforting. The knowledge that rest can be shared, that stillness can exist collectively. Allow yourself to rest within that same quiet now. The world around you is settled. Others are resting too. The night holds everyone gently. And sleep comes easily when stillness is shared. When railways began to stretch across the American landscape, they did more than connect towns and cities. They quietly reshaped the experience of distance, and with it, the way people slept. For the first time, long journeys no longer required days of walking or the slow roll of wagons. Movement itself became smoother, steadier, almost rhythmic. Trains carried people beyond familiar surroundings, into nights spent away from home. And yet, even in motion, sleep found a way. Early rail travel was unhurried by modern standards. Trains moved at measured speeds, guided by schedules, but never rushed. The sound of wheels on rails formed a steady pattern, metal meeting metal in a calm, repeating cadence. This rhythm, constant and predictable, lulled many travelers into rest. Inside passenger cars, lamps cast a low, even glow. The light was not bright enough to disturb the senses. Shadows shifted gently with the movement of the train, creating a sense of enclosure rather than exposure. Seating was simple. Blankets were brought along. People adjusted themselves as best they could, learning to rest upright or reclined, supported by the knowledge that the journey would continue whether they slept or not. There was comfort in surrendering control. Once aboard, the traveler did not need to guide the way. The rails held the path. The engineer carried the responsibility. The passenger could let go. Night travel introduced a new kind of sleep, one shaped by motion. The slight sway of the car, the low hum beneath the floor, the distant whistle echoing through dark landscapes all worked together to create a unique stillness. Within movement, outside the windows, darkness passed quietly. Fields, forests, and rivers slipped by unseen. Occasionally, a distant light appeared, another town resting as the train passed through. These glimpses were brief, like dreams that faded before fully forming. Sleeping away from home became more common. Hotels near rail stations offered rooms designed for travelers, places meant for rest, not permanence. These rooms were often quiet, neutral, and predictable. A bed, a lamp, a window, enough familiarity to allow sleep to come, even when unfamiliar. These spaces carried a sense of order. Travelers learned that rest did not require personal belongings or known surroundings. The body could adapt, finding comfort in routine rather than location. In sleeper cars, sleep became a shared experience once more. Curtains closed, lamps dimmed, the car settled into its nighttime rhythm. Breathing slowed. The train continued onward, carrying everyone gently through the dark. There was something deeply reassuring about waking briefly to motion. The world had not stopped, but it was not demanding attention either. The journey progressed quietly, without effort from those resting inside. Morning arrived gradually on the rails. Light filtered through windows. Movement slowed near stations. The body awakened gently, as if emerging from a long, continuous dream. Railways taught Americans that sleep could happen anywhere, at home, in a boarding house, or while traveling across states. Rest became portable, adaptable. As you imagine this now, you may notice how motion can still invite sleep. The gentle sway, the steady sound, the feeling of being carried. Even now, the body remembers how to rest while moving, how to find stillness within change. Allow yourself to feel that rhythm now. The slow, even motion, the quiet certainty of the path ahead. You are safe. The journey continues without your effort, and sleep arrives, just as it always has, steady, reliable, and calm. As the 19th century unfolded, a new kind of light began to appear in American towns and cities. It was not sudden or overwhelming. It did not turn night into day. Instead, gaslight arrived softly, extending evenings by degrees and changing the texture of nighttime without breaking its calm. At first, gas lamps were few. They lined select streets, marked important buildings, and glowed in public gathering places. Their light was warm and steady, softer than daylight, gentler than the flames of open candles. It spread outward in small circles, leaving plenty of darkness between each pool of glow. Evenings did not disappear under this new light. They simply lingered a little longer. As dusk settled, gas lamps were lit one by one. The act itself was quiet and deliberate. A lamplighter moved through the streets, touching flame to wick, and with each small ignition, the town eased into a different kind of night. People paused to watch, not out of excitement, but familiarity. Inside homes and shops, gaslight replaced or supplemented oil lamps. The brightness was even, reliable, and calm. Shadows softened. Rooms felt slightly larger, slightly more open, without losing their warmth. With this light, evenings found a new shape. Activities that once ended at sunset could continue gently into the early night. Reading, sewing, quiet conversation, these things flowed naturally into the extended hours. The key was restraint. Gaslight did not demand attention. It allowed the body to remain aware of the time, even as it offered clarity. The eyes did not strain, but neither were they overstimulated. Shops closed a little later. Streets remained passable after dark, but there was still a clear sense of when the day was done. The light did not remove night. It merely eased the transition. Sleep adjusted gradually. Bedtimes moved slightly later, but not abruptly. The body adapted with ease, guided by the same cues as before: fatigue, quiet, routine. The glow of gaslight did not invade bedrooms harshly. Curtains softened it. Distance dimmed it. The night remained dark enough for rest. Public spaces took on a new character. Streets felt safer, calmer. The steady glow invited slow movement rather than hurried travel. People walked unhurriedly, knowing the light would guide them home, inside. Families gathered as they always had. The hearth still burned. The table still served as a place of shared meals. Gaslight joined these rituals without replacing them. The soundscape of evening remained gentle. The hiss of gas was barely noticeable. The quiet of night continued uninterrupted. As lamps were turned down and extinguished, sleep followed easily. The act of dimming light became part of the ritual, a signal that rest was near. Gaslight allowed Americans to linger in the evening without sacrificing the depth of their sleep. It demonstrated that progress could be gradual, respectful of the body's needs. As you imagine this soft glow now, notice how different it feels from harsh brightness, how it supports calm rather than alertness. Your body responds to light instinctively. Soft light invites rest. Gentle glow eases the transition into sleep. Allow your surroundings to dim now. Let the evening stretch just enough to release the day. Night has not been pushed away. It has simply been welcomed more slowly. And sleep, patient as ever, waits just beyond the glow. Asterisk after midnight, the factory town became a different place. The sounds that defined the day had faded completely, leaving behind a deep, steady quiet. Machines that had worked tirelessly for hours now stood still, their presence felt but not heard. Streets that had once carried footsteps and wagons lay open and empty, resting beneath the wide night sky. This was the town at its most peaceful. Windows were dark, or softly shaded by curtains. The glow of a single lamp in an upstairs room hinted at someone finishing a thought before sleep returned. Most homes, however, had already surrendered to rest. The town breathed together, slow and even. Factories themselves seemed to sleep. Their tall walls held the memory of motion, but no movement stirred within. Doors were closed. Wheels were still. The hum that once filled the air had dissolved into silence. Street lamps glowed faintly, spaced far apart. Their light touched cobblestones and dirt roads without demanding attention. Shadows stretched long and soft, unmoving. The night did not hide the town that held it. Occasional sounds floated through the stillness. A distant watchman's steps, the soft call of a night bird, the slow creak of wood adjusting to cooler air. Each sound stood alone, then faded, leaving silence intact. In boarding houses, sleep deepened. Breathing rhythms aligned. Dreams unfolded quietly. The shared stillness of many lives at rest gave the town its calm. Even the river near the mill moved more gently at night, reflecting faint lights in broken patterns. Water continued its work without noise or effort. Time felt different after midnight. There was no urgency, no direction. Hours passed without being noticed. The town existed simply, without purpose beyond rest. Those awake briefly during these hours experienced a rare calm. Sitting by a window or lying still in bed, they felt connected to something larger, the collective pause of an entire place. The air itself felt heavier with quiet. Cool, still, undisturbed. Sleep returned easily during these moments. The mind, unchallenged, drifted naturally. There was no need to think, to plan, to prepare. Factory towns carried a unique kind of nighttime peace. Their daytime energy made the contrast sharper, the silence deeper. As you imagine this town now, notice the absence of movement, the comfort of knowing nothing is required. Even places built for labor rest completely in the night. Allow yourself to join that rest. The day has ended. The machines are quiet. Nothing is moving. Nothing is waiting. Sleep settles in naturally, like the town itself, after midnight. When the engines cooled and the lights dimmed, another kind of movement began, one that took place quietly behind closed eyes. In the age of steam, dreams carried the gentle imprint of daily life, shaped by familiar rhythms rather than sudden change. They arrived without force, drifting in as sleep deepened, unhurried and soft for many. Dreams reflected the steady patterns of the waking world. The mind, no longer occupied with effort, returned to simple images. Paths walked often, tools handled with care, places known well enough to feel safe. There was no rush in these dreams. They moved slowly, as the days did. Steam engines themselves sometimes appeared, not as loud or imposing machines, but as steady presences. Wheels turned smoothly. Trains glided through open landscapes. The sound of motion was calm, rhythmic, and distant, echoing the familiar lull of travel. In factory towns, dreams often borrowed from repetition. The measured pace of work translated into patterns of light and motion. Gears moved without strain. Belts turned evenly. The mind found comfort in order, even in sleep. For those who worked outdoors, dreams returned them to open spaces. Fields stretched under wide skies. Rivers moved gently alongside familiar paths. These images carried no urgency. They simply existed. Sleep in this era often deepened gradually. Dreams rose and fell in layers, sometimes vivid, sometimes barely present. There was no need to remember them. Their purpose was not meaning, but rest. Night sounds filtered softly into dreams. A distant whistle became a passing wind. The hum of a town settled into a low murmur. These sounds blended seamlessly, never pulling the sleeper fully awake. People did not analyze their dreams closely. They accepted them as part of sleep's natural flow. Some mornings brought faint impressions of color, a place, a feeling of movement. Others left no trace at all. The body rested fully during these nights. Muscles relaxed deeply. Breathing slowed. The mind wandered gently, unburdened by excess stimulation. Steam, as a symbol, represented progress and motion, but in dreams it often softened. Power became flow. Movement became ease. Even the great machines of the day lost their weight, becoming part of a calm landscape. Dreams connected people to continuity. Though the world changed during waking hours, sleep preserved a sense of steadiness. Night offered balance. As you imagine these dreams now, notice how your own mind responds to gentle images, how repetition can soothe rather than tire. You do not need to direct your dreams. They will arrive in their own time. Let the quiet rhythm of rest guide you. The steady movement of breath, the calm passage of thought. In this age, as in any other, dreams serve one purpose: to allow the mind to rest as deeply as the body. Allow them to come now, softly, as steam once rose slowly, quietly, and without effort. Sleep continues, steady and calm. In the steady rhythm of American industrial life, one day stood apart with quiet clarity. Sunday arrived not as an interruption, but as a return to stillness, to pause, to the kind of calm that reminded people how rest once felt when time moved more slowly. As the week reached its end, activity naturally softened. Factories prepared to close. Shops drew their shutters earlier. The sounds that marked daily labor began to thin and fade, replaced by a gentler hush that settled over towns and neighborhoods alike. Sunday mornings began differently. There was no rush to rise. Light filtered through windows without urgency. The air itself seemed quieter, as if the world had agreed to slow together. Church bells rang, but even their sound carried a sense of calm. Their tones traveled across fields and streets, not calling anyone forward in haste, but inviting them gently into the day. People walked unhurriedly, dressed simply, their footsteps measured and unforced. For those who gathered, the experience was quiet and reflective. For others, Sunday meant something simpler: a day without obligation, a chance to rest the body and ease the mind. Homes filled with a different kind of energy. Fires burned steadily. Meals were prepared slowly. The usual patterns of work were set aside, replaced by habits of rest. Afternoons were especially peaceful. Streets emptied. Doors closed. The world seemed to hold its breath. This pause was not empty. It was restorative. Muscles softened. Thoughts slowed. The body recognized this day as something distinct. Many took short rests in the afternoon, lying down without ceremony. Sleep came easily, lighter than nighttime sleep, but deeply refreshing. These moments of rest did not disrupt the night ahead. They supported it. Children played quietly, aware of the tone of the day. Laughter was present, but softened. Movement was gentle. As evening approached, the transition to night felt smoother. The body, already rested, welcomed sleep with ease. There was no need to recover from strain. Sunday night sleep carried a particular depth. Dreams were calm. Rest felt complete. The week ahead seemed manageable because the body had been given space to reset. The return of quiet on Sundays preserved balance. It ensured that rest was not lost entirely to progress. It reminded communities that stillness had value. As you imagine this now, consider how powerful shared rest can be. When an entire place slows together, calm becomes contagious. Allow that same calm to settle over you now. Let the noise of the week fall away. Sunday rest is not just a day. It is a feeling, one of permission, of release. Carry that feeling into this moment. The quiet has returned, and sleep, steady and welcoming, follows naturally. Bedrooms in the 19th century were not places of distraction. They were quiet, purposeful spaces, shaped almost entirely around the need for rest. Entering one felt like stepping away from the world rather than bringing the world inside. These rooms carried a stillness that encouraged sleep without effort. Most bedrooms were simple in design. Walls were plain, often painted in light, muted colors that reflected what little light entered. Windows were tall but narrow, dressed with curtains that softened both daylight and night air. Nothing in the room demanded attention, that the bed itself was the center. Frames were sturdy, often made of wood or iron, built to last through generations. Mattresses were firm but yielding, layered with straw, wool, or cotton. Sheets were crisp and cool. Quilts and blankets were heavy enough to provide comfort, yet breathable. Before sleep, the room was prepared carefully. Lamps were turned low, fires were banked, windows were adjusted according to the season. These small actions signaled that the day had ended. Night clothes were simple and loose, designed for comfort rather than fashion. Changing into them marked a clear transition. The body recognized this signal immediately. Sound in these rooms was minimal. Without constant noise, the smallest sounds stood out: the creak of a bed frame, the faint movement of air, the distant hush of the outside world. Rather than disturbing sleep, these sounds reassured it. The air was cool, even in winter. Warmth came from layers rather than heat. This balance supported deeper rest. Breathing slowed naturally. The bedrooms were not cluttered with belongings. What remained had purpose. A chair, a washstand, a small table. Each object had its place. In shared rooms, sleep was quiet and respectful. Movement was minimal. The presence of another person did not disrupt rest, it supported it. The absence of bright light preserved the night. Darkness was complete. The body responded by sinking fully into sleep. Dreams came easily in such spaces. The mind, undisturbed, wandered gently. As you imagine this bedroom now, notice how its simplicity invites calm. How little is required for rest. Allow your own space to feel just as still. Nothing to see, nothing to do. The bedroom is ready. Sleep waits patiently, and as it always has, it welcomes you without demand. When winter arrived in early America, it reshaped the rhythm of life in quiet, unmistakable ways. The days shortened, the light softened, and the world seemed to draw inward. Winter nights arrived early and lingered long, offering extended hours of rest that the body accepted without resistance. As the sun dipped below the horizon in the late afternoon, darkness settled gently over towns and countryside alike. There was no expectation that the day should continue beyond the light. Winter made its boundaries clear, and people followed them naturally. Cold air sharpened the senses during the day and soothed them at night. After work was done, warmth was gathered carefully, fires tended, blankets layered, doors secured. These rituals created a sense of enclosure, a protective stillness that wrapped around the evening. Indoors, activity slowed earlier than in other seasons. The body, responding to limited daylight, grew ready for rest sooner. Fatigue felt natural, not forced. Sleep beckoned quietly. Winter nights were long, and sleep filled them fully. People went to bed earlier and stayed there longer, rising slowly when morning finally arrived. This extended rest was not indulgent, it was necessary. The body welcomed it. Snow played its own role in deepening winter sleep. When it fell, it softened the world. Sounds were muffled. The landscape grew still. Even familiar places looked different, quieter. The hush created by snow invited deeper rest. With fewer outside sounds, the night felt complete. The mind settled easily. Bedrooms in winter felt especially calm. Cool air combined with warm coverings created the ideal balance. Breathing slowed. Muscles relaxed. Waking briefly in the night was common and untroubling. The darkness outside was complete, reassuring. There was no sense of missing anything. Dreams during winter nights often reflected the stillness, slow-moving images, muted colors, peaceful scenes. The mind mirrored the world. Morning came gradually, often after many hours of rest. Light returned slowly. There was no rush to rise. Winter taught the value of long sleep. It reminded people that rest could expand with the season. As you imagine these winter nights now, feel their quiet settling around you. The long darkness, the deep rest, allow your body to follow that same instinct. The night is long. There's time to sleep fully. Nothing will interrupt this rest. Nothing is required. Winter holds the world gently. And sleep, unhurried and complete, fills the night. As the years passed and daily life continued to change, the human body did what it has always done best. It adapted. Without struggle or resistance, It learned new patterns of movement, work, and rest. These adjustments did not happen overnight. They unfolded gradually, shaped by repetition, familiarity, and time. In early America, sleep had once followed the sun almost entirely. Darkness signaled rest. Light invited wakefulness. But as evenings extended and days grew more structured, the body responded with quiet flexibility. At first, these new patterns felt subtle. Bedtimes shifted slightly. Wake times adjusted gently. The body observed, responded, and learned. It did not demand perfection. It accepted what was offered. Routine became the teacher. Repeated actions at similar times helped guide the body's internal rhythm. Evening meals, dimming lights, shared quietall served as signals. Over time, these signals became as effective as sunset once had been. The body began to recognize the flow of the day not only by light, but by habit. Work ended. Evening settled. Sleep followed. This learning process was not mechanical. It was intuitive. The body noticed when rest felt best and returned to that pattern naturally. Even with new demands, rest remained essential. The body insisted on it gently. Through fatigue, heaviness, and calm, people learned to listen. They adjusted their lives in small ways, banking fires earlier, closing curtains, dimming lamps. These actions helped preserve the boundary between day and night. Sleep continued to thrive because it was supported, not forced. Children adapted quickly, absorbing routines without effort. Adults adjusted more slowly, but just as surely, the body's memory carried these patterns forward. Once learned, they remained, passed down through habits rather than instruction. As you imagine this now, consider how your own body has learned its patterns, how it recognizes evening, how it prepares for rest. Your body is still capable of this quiet learning. It responds to consistency, calm, and care. You do not need to instruct it. You only need to allow it the space to settle. Patterns form gently, through repetition, not pressure. As night arrives now, your body recognizes the signals, the slowing breath, the quiet mind. It knows what to do. Allow it to follow the path it has learned. Sleep comes, steady and familiar, just as it always has. As night settles around us now, the past feels close, quietly present, like a soft echo that has never fully faded. The rhythms of earlier generations still move gently beneath modern life, shaping the way rest finds us when the day finally releases its hold. Though the world has changed, these echoes remain, steady and familiar. Long ago, nights arrived without interruption. Darkness spread slowly, and people followed its lead. That memory still lives in the body. Even now, when evening deepens and sounds soften, the same invitation appears, the gentle pull toward rest. The patterns formed over centuries did not disappear. They settled into habit, into instinct. The body remembers how to slow, how to let go, how to sleep when the world grows quiet. Factories, railways, clocks, and lights all shape the way days unfolded, but none erased the need for rest. Instead, they layered new rhythms over old ones, creating a deeper understanding of balance. When you lie down tonight, you join a long, unbroken line of nights. Nights spent in farmhouses, boarding rooms, sleeper cars, quiet towns, and simple bedrooms. Each one contributed to the way sleep still arrives. The echoes of hearthlight remain in the warmth we seek. The echoes of shared stillness remain in the comfort of knowing others rest too. The echoes of slow evenings remain in the way our breath naturally deepens when the day ends. Even now, the body responds to darkness, to quiet, to routine. These responses are older than memory, carried forward through countless nights of rest. You do not need to think about them. You do not need to recreate the past. These echoes already live within you. As you listen, allow yourself to notice the familiar signs, the weight of the body settling, the mind releasing its hold, the sense that nothing more is required. The night does not ask you to hurry. It does not ask you to be alert. It simply offers itself. Outside, the world has slowed. Inside, your breathing matches that calm. Time stretches gently, without pressure. Sleep does not need to be achieved. It arrives on its own, following paths laid long ago. These echoes remind us that rest has always been part of life. Not something to earn, but something to accept. Tonight, as you rest, you carry those echoes forward. The quiet of early evenings, The stillness of sleeping towns, the softness of long winter nights, they surround you now. And as they do, sleep deepens naturally. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to listen for, only rest.